This system apocalypse started when mysterious gates suddenly shattered reality, appearing across every single era and civilization simultaneously, leaving ancient societies completely baffled by the floating anomalies, while modern citizens could only watch in absolute terror until the inevitable countdown finally hit zero, triggering a massive dungeon break that unleashed pure chaos as bloodthirsty beasts flooded the streets to hunt humans, turning everyday workers into instant prey for the horde, melting cities and burning down society in a single day, pushing humanity to the absolute brink of extinction, leaving humanity completely trapped and driven to despair. But a glimmer of hope suddenly emerged, introducing the world to powerful hunters who immediately fought back with incredible powers, healing the wounded and turning the tide. By locking the monsters back behind gates, using massive magic circles to seal them, which successfully suppressed the initial dungeon breaks. Now, they actively hunt down dungeon bosses, constantly risking their lives in bloody battles. Countless brave hunters fell in battle, sacrificing everything to protect their world, leaving humanity facing a massive monster horde until our main guy steps up to fight, confronting the beasts with absolute confidence, unleashing a surge of crackling lightning as the monsters charge forward blindly, blasting them away with pure power. With eyes cold and focused, leaving nothing but bones behind. Skeletons begin rising from the dirt as our boy summons his spectral army, calling upon the souls of fallen hunters, commanding them to awaken once more to lend him their ultimate strength, cementing his destiny as their leader. Marching forward with his undead squad, known to all as Reigo Kurosato, who immediately buffs his blade with holy power, while stacking legendary warrior skills to prepare for battle. Reigo confronts the massive dragon head-on, channeling the tragic weight of fallen souls to unleash their combined spectral fury, but he only gained this power after meeting a legendary long-dead hunter. Back then, hunters were seen as heroes, wielding rare awakened skills to save lives, or so the public was led to believe, because reality was far less glamorous, leaving him bruised, broken, and completely forgotten. Holding onto his cane with a bruised, bandaged hand, he stares at the recruitment boards mocking his low rank, while the guild receptionist sighs in absolute exhaustion, as Reigo desperately begs him for any kind of work, drawing sneers and whispers from the nearby hunters, who remember him as a walking curse who ruins every raid, earning him the infamous nickname of Reigo the Calamity. They mock his desperate attempts to find a party, leaving the receptionist with only one grim option left: retrieving the personal effects of hunters who didn't make it back. Reigo is completely stunned by the grim task, which is notoriously known as a death sentence, since touching a dead hunter's relic can steal your skills, but he has no choice if he wants to survive. So he reluctantly heads deep into the dark mines, knowing even the association refuses to touch these cursed items, while the local miners wrap up their shift, warning him that the boss fight buried everything deep underground, leaving only piles of heavy rubble behind, prompting him to start digging through the debris. Wiping away sweat after hours of digging, he realizes he only earned one measly mana point, prompting him to reluctantly activate his unique skill, which unleashes a surge of crackling blue energy as the system starts a 30-second countdown, causing his eyes to glow with power, revealing a horde of terrifying skeletal spirits who float around him in the darkness, leaving him completely underwhelmed by his useless ability, since it only attracts ghosts instead of helping him fight. Relieved that no immediate danger has spawned yet, Reigo suddenly stops in his tracks as his system switches into focus mode, revealing a glowing blue spirit floating nearby, who matches the missing poster of a B-rank hunter known for sacrificing his life to save others, leaving behind cursed relics nobody dares touch. Deeply respecting the fallen hero's final sacrifice, our boy observes the spirit closely. Realizing it has been staring at something specific, Reigo spots a sword and skull buried in the dirt, realizing the spirit was staring at his own grave, which makes his ghost-attracting skill surprisingly useful for relic hunting, even if the task feels incredibly grim. Stealing his resolve, he reaches for the glowing hilt, pulling the blade free without any sudden curse, proving that the terrifying rumors were completely exaggerated. So he quickly packs the items into his bag. But just as he finishes cleaning up, he notices a worn photograph of the hero's family. Reigo stares at the worn photo, realizing the fallen hero had a child waiting for him, which explains why the lingering spirit was staring so longingly at his own grave. Offering a quiet prayer, our boy wishes him peace before preparing to leave the dark mines. But his quiet moment is instantly ruined when a couple of arrogant hunters spot him, immediately recognizing him as the infamous walking curse who only does lowly relic retrieval, loudly mocking his terrible luck while hurrying past to avoid catching his supposed bad juju, until the smug leader suddenly stops in his tracks and glances back with greedy eyes, snatching the newly recovered sword right out of Reigo's hands to claim it for himself, only for his partner to scream in absolute terror upon realizing it's a cursed relic, sending the thief into a total panic as he instantly drops the blade like hot coal. This thief frantically wipes his hands, terrified that the cursed relic might have stolen his precious skills, before turning his embarrassment into anger by calling Reigo a pathetic loser who only robs the dead. But his partner wonders if the scavenger is actually looking for his own brother's lost belongings, prompting the thief to realize Reigo is related to Yugo Kurosato, a legendary S-rank hunter who mysteriously died, leaving the arrogant bully to immediately assume the famous S-rank was just a massive fraud. Though Reigo quietly mutters to himself that his legendary brother is actually still alive, which only makes the bully laugh harder, declaring that their entire family is completely useless, as he winds up a heavy kick to teach the scavenger a lesson about his place, sending Reigo into a panic as he desperately reaches out and begs him to stop, only for the bully to violently stomp him into the dirt for using such filthy relics. This arrogant bully screams in Reigo's face, calling him a useless piece of trash who shouldn't exist, before violently stomping our boy into the dirt and telling him to hurry up and die, while the glowing spirit of the fallen B-rank hero watches the cruel assault in absolute silence, sending the recovered sword and the precious family photo scattering across the dusty ground. Reigo lies battered on the floor, his gaze suddenly shifting toward the discarded items, noticing the torn photograph of the hero's child lying right next to the rusted blade. This blatant disrespect triggers something deep inside him, causing his eyes to flare with sudden fury as he reaches out to grab the sword, declaring they can insult him all they want. But crossing the line by desecrating a dead hero's memory is where he draws the line. Instantly activating his spiritualism skill, he summons the B-rank hunter's ghost to unleash some serious payback. Reigo unleashes his power, summoning the ghost of the B-rank hunter to his side, as a massive pillar of blue lightning erupts, confirming the spirit has possessed the sword, and our boy screams in absolute fury at the bullies for disrespecting a fallen hero, leaving the arrogant thieves completely frozen in terror as the overwhelming pressure crushes them, unable to comprehend how a supposedly weak F-rank hunter could possess such terrifying power. With crackling blue energy swirling around his hand, Reigo prepares to deliver some serious payback, but the sweating bully desperately tries to play the victim to save his own skin, which doesn't work, allowing our boy to safely secure the precious relics in his bag. Walking away from the mines, he carries the heavy sack of belongings with a quiet determination, arriving at a quiet suburban home to personally deliver the late hunter's items to his family. Reigo arrives at a surprisingly nice suburban home, clutching the heavy sack containing the late hunter's sword, knowing the Hunter Association rules strictly dictate that all recovered relics must go to a disposal facility. But he firmly believes the fallen hero's family deserves to have their loved one's final memories returned. Stealing his resolve, our boy rings the doorbell to finally deliver the precious items back home, waiting anxiously as footsteps approach, and a quiet voice answers from the other side of the door. A weary woman opens the door with her young daughter, prompting Reigo to politely introduce himself, explaining that he managed to recover some personal belongings from deep within the dangerous dungeon, before presenting the heavy sack containing the late B-rank hunter's iconic sword. Spotting the familiar blade, the little girl instantly bursts into tears and cries out for her father, clutching the weapon tightly to her chest as Reigo watches with a quiet, comforting smile. While the little girl weeps over her father's sword, an older man steps forward with pure disgust, suddenly slapping the weapon right out of her hands and sending it clattering to the ground, as he screams in absolute rage at the sight of the supposedly cursed item, leaving the precious blade lying abandoned on the cold floor like a piece of garbage, before pointing a trembling finger at Reigo and threatening to report him to the association, violently striking our boy with his cane for bringing cursed relics to their doorstep, arguing that his legendary B-rank son could never have died so easily in a dungeon, which leads him to wildly accuse Reigo of setting the hero up for his demise, while the grieving mother breaks down in tears, completely overwhelmed by the sudden chaos, prompting Reigo to desperately defend himself while the late hunter's spirit watches the entire heartbreak. This furious grandfather screams that he will blacklist Reigo from every guild before demanding salt to cleanse the curse, leaving our boy to walk away feeling like an absolute idiot for expecting a warm welcome. He eventually makes his way to a secluded traditional temple nestled quietly in the woods, which turns out to be an authorized-only storage facility meant for keeping abandoned personal belongings, where a solemn stone statue stands guard over the dusty, forgotten relics of fallen hunters, surrounded by piles of rusted weapons and wooden grave markers scattered across the dark floor, prompting Reigo to offer a sincere prayer of apology to the late Mr. Nakanishi. But as he turns to leave, a strange blue light begins to flicker behind him, revealing that the late hunter's sword is suddenly overflowing with a massive surge of spiritual energy, causing our boy to gasp in absolute shock as the system triggers another unexpected reaction. Reigo stares in disbelief as the late hunter's sword begins to glow with a brilliant blue light, prompting his system to automatically trigger a special mediumship focus mode as he grabs the hilt, while his eyes flare with a bright azure light that pierces through the dark temple, revealing the spectral form of Mr. Nakanishi materializing right before him, amidst crackling bolts of electricity. Our boy immediately apologizes to the silent spirit for failing to deliver his belongings back home, but instead of being angry, the fallen hero simply offers a warm and understanding smile, encouraging Reigo to open up about his own missing brother whose body was never recovered, admitting that he only wanted to help because he desperately wishes someone would do the same, before quickly backtracking and calling himself selfish for projecting his own family trauma onto others. He quietly looks down in shame, clutching the rusted hilt tightly as the heavy silence returns. A sudden flashback reveals the tragic day the news broadcast announced his legendary brother's death, leaving his family completely shattered as they wept over the sudden loss of their protector, while young Reigo could only stare blankly in absolute shock as his world crumbled around him, only to be cruelly blamed by everyone around him for bringing bad luck to his family, prompting our boy to grip the late hero's sword tightly as these painful memories resurface. Looking up at the glowing spirit of Mr. Nakanishi, he asks a deeply personal question, desperately wondering if the fallen hero has seen his missing brother in the afterlife. But the silent spirit spirit only offers a gentle, pitying smile that speaks louder than words, forcing Reigo to accept the harsh reality with a bittersweet smile of his own, as he quietly admits that the dangerous life of a hunter was never meant for him. Reigo laments that no trace of his brother was ever found, leaving him unable to even find his ghost. He admits he only became a hunter to search for him, but his pathetic skills make it nearly impossible, knowing he would only drag down any guild foolish enough to let him join with his limited abilities, especially since his legendary brother was a beloved powerhouse with countless comrades, making them complete opposites. Standing alone in the quiet temple, our boy accepts his fate as a solitary scavenger who belongs in the shadows, until a sudden warmth touches his shoulder, breaking him out of his depressing spiral, revealing the glowing spirit of Mr. Nakanishi standing right beside him with a comforting, reassuring expression, as the late hero gently shakes his head to disagree with Reigo's harsh self-criticism. Before gesturing for our young scavenger to step forward and accept the incredible power waiting for him, triggering a massive explosion of crackling blue lightning that completely envelops Reigo in a brilliant spiritual awakening. Reigo is blasted by a sudden eruption of fiery orange energy, shielding his eyes from the blinding light. Coughing through the intense shockwave, our boy struggles to stand as the swirling dust begins to settle, only to find a massive glowing orange gate towering right in front of him in the ancient temple. This bizarre fiery color is completely new to him, leaving him wondering why the spirit guided him here. But he has no time to think before the portal suddenly activates, pulling him forward with terrifying force, creating a massive gravitational vortex that sweeps him off his feet despite his desperate attempts to resist, swirling him directly into the center of the blinding light as he gets completely swallowed by the gate. Amidst the crackling energy, a mysterious eye-patch-wearing hunter in a red military uniform watches with a smug grin, looking incredibly pleased with themselves as they prepare to welcome their unexpected new guest to this hidden realm, leaving Reigo face down on the cold stone floor of a massive ancient dungeon hall with no escape. Reigo groans in pain as he slowly pushes himself off the cold stone floor of the mysterious dungeon, desperately scanning his surroundings for any sign of an exit before things get even worse, knowing his current F-rank abilities won't last long if he gets trapped in a high-level zone. But his heart sinks when he turns around and finds the entrance completely sealed shut. Before he can even process his terrible luck, a deafening rumble echoes through the ancient stone hall, drawing his attention to the massive wall ahead as it violently cracks and bursts open, revealing a terrifying lightning-infused bull boss named Shadowflame charging straight out of the fiery abyss. Our boy instantly panics as he realizes this is a dreaded quest-type dungeon with no escape, meaning he has to somehow defeat this absolute powerhouse just to make it out alive, leaving him screaming in pure terror as the massive beast closes the distance in a flash. This terrifying bull boss charges forward with crackling electricity, its eyes glowing with pure malice, unleashing a devastating shockwave that sends our boy flying backward through the dusty air, crashing violently onto the hard stone floor as heavy debris rains down all around him. Reigo struggles to push himself up, coughing from the impact while the massive beast prepares to strike again, but luckily the monster's glowing horn gets temporarily wedged into the solid rock ceiling. Even with this brief distraction, our boy despairs over his complete lack of combat skills, staring blankly at the ground as he prepares to accept his grim fate in this dark dungeon, until his eyes suddenly land on Mr. Nakanishi's sword, which he accidentally brought along with him, reminding him that he cannot die here before returning this precious relic to the grieving family, prompting him to reach out for the hilt with a sudden surge of desperate determination. Reigo's system warns him that draining his mana pool inside a dungeon is incredibly dangerous, but he ignores the warning to save the late hunter's sword from the charging beast, triggering a prompt that detects his selfless wish and offers to unlock a hidden skill, leaving our battered hero completely bewildered as he stares at the glowing blue screen. Desperate for any kind of miracle to survive, he reaches out his trembling hand, which instantly triggers the system to activate the mysterious hidden ability right on cue, leveling up his spiritualism skill and unlocking a bizarre power called friendship in the underworld. Suddenly, a stunning white-haired spirit begins to materialize from the swirling vortex of blue energy, prompting Reigo to look up in absolute awe as she speaks directly to him, only for the legendary eye-patch-wearing warrior to immediately roast him for being so weak. Reigo blinks in utter confusion, realizing this gorgeous new spirit is definitely not the late Mr. Nakanishi, while the mysterious eye-patch-wearing warrior gazes down at him with an incredibly unimpressed expression, crackling with blue spiritual energy as she casually asks why he is slacking off on the floor, especially since the terrifying bull boss is currently roaring in fury and preparing to crush him to pieces, prompting our boy to whine about his helplessness, only to get instantly roasted as a pathetic coward. She merely smirks at his despair, telling him to get up because he still has a fighting chance, pointing out that he is still clutching the late hunter's powerful sword in his trembling hands. But Reigo only looks down in self-pity, arguing that the weapon is completely broken and useless, sobbing that it might be better to die here instead of constantly bringing bad luck to everyone, leaving the legendary spirit to stare at him with a mixture of amusement and sudden, deadly intent. A sudden painful memory flashes through her mind as angry villagers scream to execute a traitor, showing the legendary warrior being brutally stabbed by the very people she risked her life to protect, leaving her screaming in absolute agony as they slash her face without a shred of mercy. While her former allies wildly accuse her of being a wicked witch who tempted them into ruin, she clutches her bleeding eyes in despair as the furious mob demands to burn her alive, engulfing her in a roaring inferno of hatred to ensure she can never rise to protect them again. Returning to the present, the eye-patch-wearing spirit looks down with a deeply somber and pained expression, asking Reigo if he is truly okay with accepting the blame for things he didn't do, warning him that letting others brand him a traitor will only destroy his spirit from the inside, before demanding to know why he refuses to stand up and fight back against his oppressors. She explains how she was also branded a traitor and burned alive, leaving Reigo completely stunned, before demanding that our battered hero stand up and stop feeling sorry for himself on the floor. Seeing his pathetic state infuriates her because it reminds her of the painful humiliation she once suffered, prompting her to unleash a surge of spiritual energy while commanding him to crawl back and fight, which instantly sparks a fire in Reigo's eyes as he grips the hilt with newfound determination, slowly pushing himself off the cold stone floor despite his aching body screaming in protest. Unfortunately, the terrifying bull boss finally breaks its horn free from the ceiling with a violent crash, charging straight toward our boy with a deafening roar that shakes the entire dungeon hall. Reigo screams in pure terror as the massive beast closes the distance in a flash, but he refuses to run, bracing himself to face the monster with his broken sword. This eye-patch-wearing spirit smirks in approval, pleased to see a spark of life return to his eyes, praising him for finally showing some backbone instead of wallowing in self-pity like a corpse, offering to lend him a fraction of her power since they both share the same deep regret, leaving our boy completely bewildered as he frantically demands to know who she actually is, but she ignores his confusion, blowing a breath of pure spiritual energy onto the broken blade, instantly igniting the weapon with a massive, crackling aura of brilliant blue flames, which completely overwhelms Reigo as the sheer pressure of her magic threatens to blow him away, while the terrifying bull boss continues its relentless charge directly toward the glowing weapon. Realizing she overdid it, the spirit casually warns him to stay conscious so she doesn't accidentally possess him, reminding him that this is his fight as he grips the blazing sword with everything he has. This mysterious spirit proudly reveals her legendary identity as the Warrior of Revelation, Joan of Arc, leaving Reigo completely dumbfounded as the system confirms she has possessed his broken sword, while her fiery spirit commands him to show her the true depth of his struggle, igniting a spark of pure determination in our boy's eyes as he faces the threat, bracing himself to clash with the roaring bull boss as Joan cheers him on to victory. Suddenly, a flashback from 2 years ago shows his legendary brother asking if he wants to be a hunter, prompting young Reigo to self-deprecatingly joke that his parents have already completely given up on him. But his brother doesn't find the sad joke funny at all, looking down in quiet concern, making our boy look up in confusion at his brother's unusually serious expression, before his brother gently tells him to stop laughing at himself because he is actually the amazing one. Reigo is completely baffled, wondering how he could ever be more amazing than an S-rank powerhouse. But his brother explains that having comrades made him realize just how incredible Reigo's unique talent really is, pointing out that our boy possesses the rare ability to deeply feel other people's sadness and pain, which makes his seemingly weak spiritualism skill something incredibly special in a world full of heartless hunters. Remembering those comforting words is the only thing keeping Reigo standing as he faces his ultimate trial, and with a sudden roar, he channels Joan's blazing blue spiritual energy directly into his broken sword, leaping straight toward the charging bull boss without a single shred of fear left in his heart, while the legendary warrior grins in absolute delight, commanding him to show her the true depth of his struggle, challenging him to prove how he intends to survive and conquer the curse that has held him back, before our boy unleashes a devastating, blinding slash of pure spiritual fire to claim his destiny. This terrifying bull boss glares forward, ready to crush our boy with its crackling lightning, but the massive beast suddenly pauses in confusion as it senses a terrifying shift in the air, prompting Reigo to unleash a desperate battle cry while swinging his newly empowered weapon with everything he has. Instantly, the broken blade erupts into a roaring torrent of brilliant, searing orange flames, channeling the legendary spirit's immense power as our boy brings the blazing sword straight down, unleashing a devastating fiery slash that sends the giant monster flying backward through the dusty air. Engulfed in a blazing inferno, the once mighty beast howls in absolute shock as the fire consumes it, leaving Reigo standing victorious amidst the smoke with his heart pounding from the sheer thrill of survival. Suddenly, he remembers the legendary hero's tragic history of being burned at the stake, realizing with a grin that her fiery demise is exactly why this sword now packs such a scorching punch. Reigo collapses onto the dusty ground, catching his breath while the terrifying bull boss glares him down. But our boy refuses to give up, gritting his teeth with absolute determination to survive this nightmare, prompting the massive beast to open its jaws and charge up a devastating blast of pure energy. Our boy braces for impact, clutching the late hunter's sword as he prepares for the worst. only for a massive glowing magic circle to suddenly manifest and block the incoming torrent of flames, leaving him completely speechless as the ancient weapon begins absorbing the fiery attack like a sponge. When the smoke finally clears, our battered hero stands completely unscathed, blinking in utter confusion while the frustrated monster continues to unleash its fiery wrath directly at his glowing barrier, engulfing the entire cavern in a blazing inferno that fails to scratch our incredibly lucky protagonist. Suddenly, Joan's spirit materializes to laughingly explain that she needs her actual legendary sword to unleash her full power. Joan's voice echoes in Reigo's head, demanding to know how he plans to survive this nightmare, while the terrifying bull boss charges forward, breathing a massive torrent of crackling flames, leaving our boy to realize that dodging these lightning-fast attacks is completely out of the question. But just as panic starts to set in, his eyes suddenly glow with a strange blue light, revealing a spectral vision of the fallen hunters who previously fought this very same beast. These skeletal spirits clash desperately with the monster, screaming to protect their comrades at all costs, showing the horrific moments of their demise as they burned alive while begging for healing magic. Yet one brave warrior still chose to hold the line so his friends could escape. Watching these tragic ghosts continue their endless battle even after death deeply moves our young hero, who finally understands their lingering regrets and prepares to lay their restless souls to peace. Reigo witnesses the lingering frustration of the fallen hunters who died in this very room, feeling the heavy burden of their unfulfilled wishes and the sorrow they left behind, as the agonizing pain of their final moments continues to burn within their spectral forms. He deeply understands their crushing guilt of failing to protect the people they cared about, realizing that every single ghost trapped in this dungeon carries a heavy weight of regret, which triggers a memory of his brother reminding him of his unique gift to feel others' pain, praising his seemingly weak spiritualism skill as something truly incredible and meant for greatness. This sudden realization sparks a powerful transformation as his eyes ignite with brilliant blue energy, prompting him to raise his blazing sword to finally answer the silent pleas of the Nameless, summoning a massive army of skeletal warriors to stand by his side as new comrades. This restless spirits of the fallen hunters answer his call, gathering together to unite their lingering regrets, urging each other to combine their remaining strength for one final push against the beast, as a young warrior weeps about his unfulfilled desire to finally defeat the dungeon boss, while another spirit desperately cries out about wanting nothing more than to save her fallen comrades, and a grieving mother begs for the chance to return to the family she left behind. Their collective agony echoes through the dark cavern as they scream to escape this endless cycle of suffering, reaching out with spectral hands that crackle with a sudden surge of powerful blue magic, placing all their hopes on Reigo as he raises his glowing blade high into the air, leaving Joan completely speechless as she realizes our boy is actually rallying the souls of the dead, before he charges forward with a fiery battle cry to lead his new spectral army into battle. These spirits pour their remaining energy into Reigo, begging him to avenge their fallen comrades, while another ghost entrusts him with everything they had left in this cruel world, prompting our boy to charge forward with a deafening war cry that echoes through the cavern, bringing his blazing sword down to clash directly against the terrifying bull boss's massive horns, instantly triggering a massive explosion of flames as the system confirms the shadow boss is finally defeated. With the monster turned to ash, the freed spirits begin cheering in absolute triumph, celebrating their long-awaited release from the endless cycle of torment they suffered in this dungeon, leaving Reigo to watch them with a warm, quiet smile of genuine relief on his face, as the spectral army slowly dissolves into peaceful blue light, leaving only silent bones behind, leaving our young hero standing alone in the quiet cavern, ready to face whatever comes next. Reigo smiles softly as the warm, sparkling light of the freed spirit surrounds him, as the bright light of the departing souls slowly fades into a quiet calm, leaving him standing in the silent cavern while the legendary warrior turns to face him, wearing a genuine, proud smile that shows she is genuinely impressed by his feat. Joan praises his incredible ability to rally low-level ghosts and channel them into his weapon, realizing that his unique talent is the exact reason he was able to summon her, before she joyfully declares that she has finally found someone who can break her curse, prompting our young hero to stand tall with his broken sword and newfound resolve, only for his body to instantly give out as he collapses from sheer exhaustion, while the legendary spirit stares down at him with a completely speechless, deadpan expression. Joan immediately takes back her praise, teasing our boy for being pathetically exhausted after just one fight, but Reigo just laughs it off while looking down at the late hunter's broken sword, deciding that his very first priority should be returning this precious relic to its rightful owner. Meanwhile, a young girl stands outside her home holding a mysterious note about her father's final belongings, looking completely lost as she tries to process the sudden message left on her doorstep, prompting her to head over to a quiet, traditional shrine nearby to investigate the matter further. Sliding open the heavy wooden doors, she peers into the dimly lit room with cautious curiosity, only to gasp in sheer disbelief as her eyes lock onto a surprising package on the floor, where her late father's broken sword lies carefully wrapped alongside a beautiful bouquet of fresh flowers, causing tears of overwhelming relief and sorrow to stream down her face as she receives his final legacy. This grieving girl clutches her father's broken sword, weeping tears of gratitude for this final closure, while Reigo watches from the doorway alongside Joan, who playfully calls the girl soft-hearted, prompting our boy to suddenly realize that his legendary spirit companion can actually leave the dungeon with him. This shocking revelation sparks a brilliant idea in his head as he thinks about the empty dungeon, wondering if he can actually sell the mining rights of this cleared zone for some serious cash, leading him to meet up with professional miners right in front of the glowing red portal, who look at the young hunter with deep skepticism while evaluating the valuable property, since guildless hunters can make a fortune by selling these rare resource rights to specialized companies. An older miner asks if he prefers gambling his life away over the safety of a guild, leaving our awkward protagonist to nervously deflect the question while keeping his secret cards close to his chest. Reigo eagerly asks the miners how much cash he can actually expect from this deal, and his jaw completely drops when they casually estimate a cool 1 million yen, leaving our broke protagonist internally screaming in absolute shock at this life-changing sum of money, though he quickly tries to play it cool and awkwardly accepts their offer instead. As the sun sets beautifully over the bustling city skyline later that evening, a quick glance at his phone confirms a massive deposit has officially cleared, sending his heart into overdrive as he stares at the newly updated balance in disbelief, prompting our boy to immediately plan a much-needed shopping spree for some decent clothes, a fresh haircut, and a massive feast of actual, delicious food to celebrate his victory, before his journey takes him straight toward a massive, luxurious estate under the golden sky. A suited subordinate politely knocks and enters a lavishly decorated room to deliver an urgent report, explaining that a mysterious gate suddenly appeared in a suburban cemetery with an overwhelming amount of mana, but when his team went in to investigate, they found the boss already burned to a crisp, leaving them completely baffled since even S-rank hunters would struggle to unleash that kind of insane firepower. This messenger adjusts his glasses, nervously admitting they couldn't find any trace of the dungeon's holy relic, which immediately gets his eccentric, muscular boss wondering if some petty thief beat them to the punch, or if there is another hunter out there who specifically targets these powerful, cursed artifacts. Realizing that a rival collector could easily ruin his plans, the flamboyant warrior grows incredibly annoyed, deciding right then and there that he absolutely cannot let anyone else claim his prize. Before drawing his sword with a terrifying purple aura, ready to hunt down our boy and take it back, Reigo decides to treat himself to a relaxing soak at a traditional bathhouse under the golden sunset, stepping outside while feeling incredibly refreshed and clear-headed for the first time in ages, only to find his legendary companion patiently waiting for him right outside the entrance, prompting Joan to stare him down with her usual quiet, analytical gaze. But our boy looks completely different now, practically glowing with a fresh haircut and clean clothes, which immediately catches the spirit's attention as she notices his aura has completely shifted. Reigo smiles softly as he remembers the core motivation he had somehow lost along the way, clenching his fist under the sunset as he declares his burning desire to finally get stronger, leaving the legendary warrior completely taken aback by his sudden spark of genuine determination, because he knows that gaining power is the only way to protect and reclaim his precious family. Reigo remembers his brother's encouraging words about having the power to protect what matters, staring at an old framed photo of them together as he finds his true motivation, which prompts him to look Joan dead in the eye and declare his ultimate goal to get stronger, wearing a confident smile as he prepares to ask the legendary warrior for a massive favor. He asks if she will help him train, hoping her proud expression means she will say yes, only for Joan to instantly shut him down with a blunt refusal, sending our boy face-planting in despair. Reigo desperately begs her to reconsider, but the legendary spirit raises her hand to offer a single condition, promising to train him only if he recovers her lost relic, the legendary sword of Fierbois, leaving our young hero completely stunned as he realizes she is asking him to find Jean's actual weapon, while the legendary warrior smiles knowingly, waiting to see if he is brave enough to accept the quest. Reigo stands before the glowing red portal with two professional miners to negotiate the zone's valuable rights, and the workers quickly evaluate the entrance, noting that the resources inside seems incredibly promising, though they still wonder why a young hunter would choose to gamble his life without a guild, leaving our awkward protagonist to nervously deflect their prying questions to keep his secret safe. He eagerly shifts the conversation to the only thing that actually matters, the final payout, prompting the miners to casually offer a cool 1 million yen for the cleared zone. This very next day, a dark and terrifying aura completely consumes a nearby cemetery, where a helpless victim desperately begs for mercy while being choked by an unseen force, as a powerful hand grips his throat with terrifying strength, cutting off his air completely. It turns out the flamboyant collector is ruthlessly interrogating locals to track down his stolen relic. This terrified local desperately pleads for his life while his partner lies defeated on the ground. But the flamboyant collector refuses to show any mercy as he demands answers about the mysterious seller, prompting the trembling man to stammer that the stranger only wanted to sell the mining rights anonymously, which only annoys the muscular boss as he casually wipes his hands clean of the useless trash, before reaching down to pick up a pair of special goggles left behind in the dirt, putting them on while sadistically noting that these weaklings are far more useful to him dead, instantly activating the magical accessory as a bright blue energy begins to swirl within the lenses. allowing him to clearly track the incredibly thick traces of residual mana left behind in the area. Since every awakened hunter shapes their aura into unique skills, these massive traces prove a powerful warrior was here, leaving the eccentric collector licking his lips at the thought of stealing those legendary relics for himself. This flamboyant collector laughs maniacally as he walks away, leaving his beaten victims behind in the dirt. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a bright and peaceful afternoon outside a cozy local cafe, where a legendary chocolate-drizzled frappuccino topped with whipped cream sits sparkling under the sun, prompting our broke protagonist to stare at the legendary beverage with absolute wide-eyed reverence, completely losing his mind as he finally beholds the mythical drink of his dreams, taking a massive, satisfying sip through the straw to experience the ultimate luxury, which sends him into pure bliss while Joan watches him with a deeply unimpressed expression, forcing our boy to defend his treat by explaining how poor he was after his brother disappeared, though he immediately ruins the moment by completely butchering the name of her legendary relic, prompting the annoyed spirit to proudly summon a vision of her beloved weapon, the Sword of Fierbois. Joan admits that since being bound to that dungeon, her legendary sword's whereabouts became a complete mystery, leaving our boy to quietly process the news while happily sipping on his overpriced chocolate drink, as she explains that recovering it would allow her to unleash her full power through him, prompting Rego to ponder the massive potential of wielding the world's strongest relic. But their peaceful afternoon chat is suddenly cut short by an ominous chill in the air, as a massive spike of ice violently erupts from the ground and ruins his perfect day, instantly freezing his beloved, expensive Frappuccino solid before he can even finish it. Sending nearby civilians screaming in terror as sharp frozen shards rain down all over the patio, our protagonist yells in absolute disbelief at this sudden, unprovoked attack on his precious treat, only to spot a menacing dark silhouette slowly approaching them through the freezing mist. This flamboyant collector steps through the icy mist with his sword drawn, looking highly disappointed, complaining that our boy's aura is way too weak compared to the thick trace he was tracking, wondering if this plain-looking kid could actually be the one who cleared that high-level hidden dungeon, prompting the eccentric warrior to call out to Rego, who turns around in complete surprise, before the collector demands that he immediately hand over any valuable relics found inside the zone. Rigo freezes in confusion as he tries to process this sudden aggressive demand from a stranger, remembering the barren, empty dungeon floor that had absolutely nothing of value left inside, realizing that the only relic he actually retrieved was the broken sword he brought out himself, prompting our boy to play dumb and nervously claim he found absolutely nothing in the dungeon, which only makes the suspicious collector narrow his eyes, analyzing the kid's reaction with deep skepticism. This flamboyant collector wags his finger with a creepy smile, warning our boy that lying is a terrible idea, offering to make his demise quick and painless if he just hands over the relic right now. But his expression quickly turns incredibly dark as he prepares to deliver a much more brutal alternative, unleashing a blinding, terrifying aura while promising to utterly destroy our protagonist if he dares to refuse. Rego stands completely frozen in sheer disbelief, utterly stunned by this stranger's overwhelming power and absolute madness. Laughing maniacally, the eccentric warrior swings his sword to send a massive wave of jagged ice spikes rushing forward, forcing our boy to scramble backward in panic, wondering if he is dealing with a high-level ice mage, only for Joan to suddenly appear and bluntly tell him to use his appraisal skill to see the truth. As the freezing blue energy continues to swirl violently around the flamboyant collector, a terrifying chained skeletal specter emerges from the shadows behind him, revealing the true dark source of his power. Rigo's eye flares with a bright blue light as he activates his appraisal skill in shock, pointing directly at the chained specter hovering behind the flamboyant collector to ask if it's a relic, which immediately flatters the eccentric warrior, who proudly admits he recently harvested this powerful soul. He explains that the spirit belonged to a hunter who died before fulfilling his grand ambitions, casually dismissing the man's ice magic as trash, while treating his suffering soul like a disposable tool. Joan quickly realizes the truth, whispering to our boy that the collector cannot even see these ghosts, meaning Rego is the only one who can actually perceive the tragic spirits bound to this world. As the chained specter continues to wail in absolute agony amidst the swirling blue flames, our protagonist clenches his teeth in anger, deeply disturbed by how much these souls are suffering, but the impatient collector just laughs, threatening to brutally violate him if he doesn't hand over his loot. Rego realizes this sick collector is actually using deceased hunters' belongings to bind and torment their helpless spirits, keeping them chained up in absolute agony just to fuel his own stolen magical abilities, prompting our furious protagonist to step up and demand that he release those poor souls immediately. But the eccentric villain completely ignores the warning, instead creepily complimenting our boy's cute face, drawing his blade with a twisted smile as he promises to make things much more intimate, before unleashing a devastating wave of sharp ice spikes that tears right through the patio, forcing Rego to cross his arms in a desperate attempt to block the freezing onslaught, though the sheer force of the blast still sends him flying backward through shattered furniture, leaving the flamboyant collector to laugh and mockingly declare that they are only just getting started. while our hero struggles to find his footing, realizing he desperately needs a weapon to survive. Reigo scrambles on the floor, realizing his sword is broken before spotting a random butter knife nearby. He decides to use the cheap utensil as a vessel, though Joan immediately rejects the insulting idea. Our desperate protagonist completely ignores her protests, instantly activating his mediumship skill to force the possession. This legendary warrior looks absolutely disgusted that he would try to trap her in something so vulgar, but her complaints are cut short as the swirling blue energy begins to drag her in. A massive surge of magical power erupts, violently pulling the screaming spirit directly into the tiny knife, leaving Joan completely dumbfounded that this weak kid actually has the power to forcefully bind her. Meanwhile, the eccentric collector quietly watches the flashy light show with a deeply amused expression, creepily licking his lips as he decides he has waited long enough for this little game, leaping high into the air to unleash a devastating, freezing strike that shatters the ground below. This flamboyant collector gasps in utter shock as a sudden blinding light erupts from the kid's hand, revealing our protagonist engulfed in a massive swirling vortex of pure blue spiritual energy, which allows him to miraculously block a heavy sword strike using only his tiny crackling butter knife, prompting the eccentric villain to smirk in amusement, mockingly praising the kid's unexpected resilience. Though Reigo still struggles to hold his ground as the intense magical pressure begins to build, until the flimsy utensil finally reaches its absolute limit and shatters into useless metal shards, leaving our young hero completely defenseless as the broken pieces clatter harmlessly onto the floor. Scoffing at the pathetic display, the smug collector looks down with absolute disdain, casually stepping forward to kick the debris aside as he prepares to finish the job, instantly summoning his chained skeletal specter to wrap our helpless protagonist in agonizing blue spiritual chains. Reigo finds himself completely pinned down by the agonizing blue chains of the screaming skeletal specter, while the smug collector opens his coat to casually browse through his stolen collection of relics, pulling out a wicked-looking purple sickle that crackles with a dark, sinister energy, before crossing his arms to activate a terrifying skill that lights up the entire room, unleashing a twisted technique called forced reincarnation to forcefully bind another tragic soul to his command, prompting the newly summoned skeletal specter to scream in absolute agony as it begs for freedom, which only makes our horrified protagonist grit his teeth in sheer disgust at this monstrous display. With a casual snap, the eccentric villain whips the massive purple chain forward with blinding speed, forcing Reigo to desperately block the heavy impact with his bare hands as the shockwave rattles him, leaving the disappointed collector to sigh at how vulgar the fight is before preparing his next strike. This flamboyant collector casually reaches into his pink coat to put away his current relic, sliding the useless accessory into a pocket while searching for something much more lethal, which leaves our boy watching in disbelief as the villain tosses a high-grade item aside, before the eccentric warrior pulls out a long, glowing golden needle with a wicked grin, instantly throwing the weapon with terrifying speed before Reigo can even register the movement. This smug collector casually flicks his wrist, treating the deadly attack like a simple game, while a massive surge of golden energy tears through the air right next to our protagonist, narrowly missing his face by a fraction of an inch and leaving him completely paralyzed, allowing the eccentric villain to catch the projectile while happily evaluating its incredible power, leaving Reigo to touch his bleeding cheek, utterly terrified that he couldn't even see it coming. This flamboyant collector steps forward with a flaming hand, demanding Reigo hand over the dungeon's holy relic, while our boy grits his teeth in frustration, realizing just how bad his situation is, especially with all those tortured chained specters screaming in absolute agony right in front of him, as the eccentric villain casually strolls through the blue flames, completely ignoring their endless suffering. Reigo bites his lip as he realizes Joan can't even see these tragic ghosts, prompting him to stand tall and angrily accuse the collector of desecrating the dead hunter's belongings, asking how he could possibly ignore the immense grief and pain bound to those stolen relics, which only makes the flamboyant warrior pause, looking mildly amused by the kid's sudden outburst. But Reigo refuses to back down, shouting that he is completely disrespecting his own fallen comrades, leaving the eccentric collector to just stare back in silence before letting out a creepy chuckle. Reigo prepares to fight back with everything he has left, gathering his remaining spiritual energy, but the collector instantly closes the distance, introducing himself as Agio while holding a deadly needle to our boy's throat, prompting a startled Reigo to reluctantly reveal his full name as Reigo Kurosato, which immediately causes Agio's eyes to widen in absolute shock as he processes the familiar surname, instantly recognizing our protagonist as the younger brother of a legendary hunter named Yugo Kurosato, leaving Reigo completely stunned as he stumbles back, demanding to know how this creep actually knows his brother, only for Agio to clasp his hands together with a deeply flushed, overly dramatic expression, revealing that Yugo was actually his former guild leader who once tried to brutally eliminate him, prompting our boy to stare back in absolute horror at this incredibly bizarre and terrifying confession, as the eccentric warrior happily recalls that near-death experience as the absolute peak of his entire life. Agio shudders with a deeply flushed face, completely lost in his twisted, nostalgic memories, screaming in pure ecstasy as he unleashes another massive wave of blinding golden energy, forcing our boy to brace himself for the impact, fully expecting a fatal blow. But as he closes his eyes, a strange blue light suddenly flares within his mind, revealing the eccentric villain frozen midair as if time itself has suddenly ground to a halt, prompting Reigo to look down at his hands in complete disbelief as blue spiritual energy swirls around him. While Agio's distorted face shows a sudden, creeping sense of confusion at this bizarre phenomenon, our protagonist realizes that the legendary warrior's movements are drastically slowing down in his perception, along with the deadly golden needle that is now practically crawling through the air, leaving our young hero completely speechless as he tries to comprehend this incredible new power. Despite the sudden slowdown, Agio's heavy fist still connects directly with Reigo's face, sending him flying backward. Our protagonist crashes hard onto the stone floor, skidding across the room as the eccentric collector watches. Groaning in absolute agony, the battered kid struggles to pick himself up while his terrifying opponent slowly approaches. This flamboyant villain stares at his own hand in confusion, realizing some strange force actually resisted his attack. Agio wonders if the boy possesses some hidden defensive skill, while Reigo desperately tries to catch his breath. Suddenly, Joan's voice echoes as she reveals her own skill, Witch's bondage is the one protecting him. She manifests to scold him for using a cheap butter knife, though she admits her power is limited. Reigo finally connects the dots about her movement-sealing abilities, just as Joan warns him to keep his guard up. A blinding golden projectile suddenly streaks toward him, forcing our boy to dodge by the absolute skin of his teeth. Joan explains she can only slow the enemy down right before impact, leaving the rest of the fight entirely up to him. Agio floats back with a dramatic flourish, casually raining down more of his deadly golden needles, but Reigo manages to weave through the projectiles, relying on Joan's movement-slowing magic to survive, prompting the eccentric villain to mockingly praise his skills while striking another incredibly flamboyant pose. Ignoring the taunts, our furious protagonist demands to know what happened to his legendary brother after their battle, only for Agio to shrug mockingly, claiming Yugo abandoned his own comrades and fled like a coward, which instantly pushes our young hero over the edge as absolute rage consumes him. Another golden needle streaks forward with explosive force, barely missing Reigo as the shockwave rattles the room, while the eccentric collector continues to mock him with a deeply unsettling, playful gesture. As our boy growls in absolute anger, his weapon suddenly igniting with a fierce spiritual flame, fiercely shouting that his legendary brother would never abandon his allies in battle. Agio pauses in surprise, reaching into his flamboyant pink coat to pull something out, as he reveals an official guild report to prove his claims about Reigo's brother are absolutely true. But our protagonist is too busy struggling against the agonizing blue chains of the Screaming Spectre, until he unleashes a sudden burst of spiritual energy that completely shatters the necromancy spell. This unexpected display of raw power actually amuses Agio, who realizes he might have slightly underestimated the kid, prompting the flamboyant villain to instantly close the distance and deliver a devastating lightning-fast strike, which hits Reigo so hard that he spits out blood from the sheer force of the impact. Joan manifests in complete shock, realizing her movement-slowing magic wasn't enough to fully stop the blow, while Agio casually rubs his fist, quickly deducing that some hidden defensive skill is actively slowing him down, before smiling creepily as he decides to simply bypass the trick by moving even faster than before. Reigo struggles to push himself up from the dusty floor, coughing from the brutal impact, while wiping blood from his mouth and questioning the insane logic of his opponent's overwhelming speed, realizing with absolute dread just how terrifyingly powerful high-ranking hunters can actually be, as Agio casually picks up his golden needle while complaining about his relic being seen through, leaving our young hero on high alert as he desperately prepares for the next incoming attack. Suddenly, the eccentric collector snaps his own high-grade weapon in half, casually firing the useless tool, which causes the chained skeletal specter to scream out in absolute, ear-piercing agony, begging to finally be released from its eternal torment while Reigo watches in complete horror, his anger boiling over as he witnesses the tragic spirit suffering so much right in front of him, prompting our furious protagonist to charge forward with a fiery fist, demanding to know how the villain can ignore such pain. Reigo pours every ounce of his remaining spiritual energy into a desperate, fiery punch, while the flamboyant collector simply watches him approach with a smug, unimpressed expression. Suddenly, Joan manifests to cast her witch's bondage skill once again to assist him, instantly wrapping the eccentric villain in blue magic that makes his massive body feel incredibly heavy, giving our young hero the perfect opening to scream in rage and unleash his strike. This fiery fist connects directly with Agio's chest, unleashing a massive shockwave across the room. But as the smoke clears, the terrifying hunter stands completely unfazed by the impact, mockingly whining about how much it hurts while the flames harmlessly flicker around him, leaving our protagonist utterly speechless as he realizes his strongest attack didn't even leave a scratch, forcing the desperate kid to quietly reach for his last hidden weapon to survive. Reigo narrowly dodges another blinding golden beam, using the split-second distraction to execute his escape plan, Our boy quickly pulls out the stolen guild report containing the critical secrets about his brother, screaming for Joan to activate her magic right now while the flamboyant villain watches in amusement, prompting the annoyed witch to reluctantly unleash her signature binding spell with a flash of blue energy, which successfully traps the eccentric hunter in place and buys our young hero enough time to flee. Sirens wail in the distance as Agio looks down at the minor wound on his chest, casually admiring the blood on his blade while chuckling at the kid's surprisingly decent effort, comparing Reigo's impressive potential to his legendary brother before happily walking away from the ruined battlefield. A suited security agent suddenly arrives, telling the eccentric collector to leave the rest to their forces, leaving the officer to wonder if letting him go was wise since the report held Masakato's location. Agio wears a creepy smirk, admitting he actually let our boy steal the report on purpose, knowing the kid's obsession with his legendary brother would make him take the bait perfectly. But the flamboyant hunter is still highly curious about Reigo's bizarre ability to talk to thin air, deciding to let him keep the document to see how he handles the secrets of Masakato. Meanwhile, our exhausted protagonist sprints down a quiet, narrow alleyway to finally escape the chaos, stopping to catch his breath while his heart pounds from the sheer intensity of the encounter, only for Joan to manifest and mockingly congratulate him on his incredible tactical retreat. But Reigo just winks playfully, proudly holding up the stolen journal like a hard-earned trophy, glad that he at least managed to free the tragic ghost from its eternal torment, before clutching the precious book tightly, ready to uncover the truth about his brother's mysterious past. Joan mockingly asks our boy if he was completely overwhelmed by the massive gap in their power, leaving a sweating Reigo to silently process just how close he came to absolute disaster, as he quietly admits that the terrifying hunter was on a completely different level, realizing that without the witch's timely intervention he would have been completely done for. This sassy witch huffs in annoyance, explaining her magic was heavily limited by the cheap weapon he was using, prompting our protagonist to ask if the legendary Fierbois sword would finally unlock her full potential, though he still feels frustrated about having to run away instead of getting answers about his brother. But his gloomy mood instantly vanishes as a sudden spark of determination lights up his face, leaving him grinning with absolute hype as he realizes how much stronger he can still get. Joan can only stare back in deadpan silence, completely baffled by her partner's unhinged optimism. Reigo realizes that his dream of becoming a powerful hunter is actually within reach, clutching the stolen journal tightly as a sudden wave of excitement completely takes over, while his ghostly companion just stares back with her signature look of absolute disappointment. Our boy eagerly suggests finding her legendary sword to finally solve his brother's mysterious disappearance, but the sassy witch immediately shuts him down by asking if he even has a plan, prompting our protagonist to confidently hold up the stolen guild report with a smug grin. He explains that tracking the dungeons listed inside will lead them straight to her lost weapon, leading them directly to a massive blue holographic portal known as the Manji Hall Gate, where the local security staff is busy checking the credentials of all incoming hunters, leaving our nervous hero completely speechless when they suddenly ask him for his official license. Sweating under his hood, our boy quickly panics and blurts out the first fake name he can think of, promising to bring his actual hunter license right after the raid while Joan silently judges his terrible acting. But the skeptical guards point out that the lack of internet makes physical verification absolutely mandatory, leaving our protagonist to scan the room until his eyes lock onto a glowing blue crystal device, prompting him to confidently suggest using the nearby aura meter to prove his power meets their standards, since a hunter's aura directly correlates to their overall strength and ability to cast high-cost skills. Though the staff members look completely unimpressed by his sudden burst of confidence, explaining that this dangerous dungeon requires at least a C-rank rating to even step inside. They whisper about how desperate low-rank rookies constantly try to sneak in just to get themselves killed, completely unaware that our young hero is about to shatter their expectations with his actual power. The skeptical guards decide to run the test quickly, fully expecting the kid to fail miserably, but Reigo instantly activates his mediumship skill, merging his aura with Joan's in a massive blue explosion, channeling the intense spiritual energy directly into his hand as the power crackles wildly, prompting the guard to casually hold up the scanner, completely unaware of what is coming. Our boy confidently smiles, knowing this combined power should easily push him straight into C-rank territory, as the device lets out a soft beep to finalize the reading on his aura. Suddenly, the staff members freeze in absolute shock as the scanner begins to glitch out, screaming in sheer panic when the massive energy surge completely overloads their system, leaving them staring at a giant red error message flashing on their ruined screen, prompting the furious guard to accuse him of breaking the machine while our hero plays dumb. This panicked guard decides to let the broken scanner slide, telling our boy to just bring his license later, secretly assuming the kid is just another overconfident rookie who won't survive long enough to return. But as he stares at the flashing error screen, a shocking realization suddenly hits him, realizing that the massive energy spike actually represents an unmeasurable S-rank level of power. Meanwhile, our protagonist blends into the crowd of eager hunters preparing to enter the massive portal, keeping his head down to avoid drawing any unwanted attention to himself as they approach the gate, prompting Joan to mockingly ask why he is hiding his face under that ridiculous hood. Reigo snaps back that his notorious reputation would instantly ruin his chances of joining the guild, forcing him to rely on a fake name while navigating the suspicious crowd. As he confidently declares his mission to find her legendary sword and uncover his brother's secrets, Reigo and Joan approach the glowing portal, though the witch doubts her legendary sword is actually inside. Our boy quickly holds up the stolen notebook, reminding her of the crucial clues written within its pages. He explains that this low-level dungeon has a terrible reputation due to a string of mysterious incidents, prompting Joan to recall how his legendary brother suspected a highly powerful entity was lurking deep inside. They agree to search every single corner, just as a loud voice suddenly interrupts the gathered crowd. An energetic, orange-haired raid leader named Fukuyama waves cheerfully to welcome all the assembled hunters, downplaying the dark rumors by claiming the dungeon is only rated as a simple B-rank threat, promising a massive guild bonus to anyone who manages to successfully defeat the final boss. This quiet protagonist silently observes the cheering crowd, keeping his guard up despite the leader's overly optimistic speech, while other confident hunters grin smugly, completely unaware of the terrifying dangers waiting for them inside. Suddenly, Reigo gasps in absolute shock as his eyes lock onto someone in the crowd, prompting Joan to ask what is wrong while our boy quickly hides under his hood. He sweatingly explains that those thugs are the ones who broke his mentor's precious sword, recalling the smug bullies who terrorized him long before he ever met his ghostly partner. This sassy witch mockingly asks if he's as scared, forcing him to maintain his composure, though her playful expression quickly softens into a surprisingly serious and observant stare. Our protagonist bitterly remembers how completely helpless he was during their last painful encounter, but now his eyes glow with a dangerous power as he fears he might kill them. Joan bursts into delighted laughter, absolutely thrilled by her partner's sudden dark confidence, leaving our nervous hero praying they do not recognize him as the raid finally begins. Reigo begins his descent down a massive rope ladder, plunging straight into the glowing blue abyss of the dungeon, keeping his hood up to maintain his disguise while nervously scanning the sheer drop below him, until he finally reaches the bottom and steps into a dark, foggy cavern filled with an eerie atmosphere. Our boy immediately feels a chill run down his spine, realizing the air in here is incredibly heavy, as he stares into the pitch-black depths of the cave where a sinister presence seems to be lurking, his instincts warning him that this place holds a far more terrifying threat than a normal B-rank dungeon, leaving him standing completely frozen in the glowing water as the dark mist swirls around him, only for a cheerful voice to suddenly startle him, calling out to him as if he were just a porter, revealing a bubbly pink-haired girl who playfully teases him about his legs shaking from the intense pressure, asking if this is his first B-rank raid while our nervous hero quickly plays along to keep his cover. This pink-haired girl kindly warns him to stick close, explaining that wandering off alone is a total death sentence. Reigo quickly agrees. Realizing that playing the role of a clueless newbie porter is his perfect cover story, she cheerfully tells him to stay in the back and watch the high-ranking pros do the actual heavy lifting, introducing herself as Risa with an energetic smile while insisting he skip the formal honorifics entirely, leaving our disguised hero to awkwardly accept her request while trying his absolute best to blend in, which immediately prompts a jealous Joan to manifest and mockingly ask if this girl is somehow stronger than him. But their banter is cut short as they finally catch up to the rest of the waiting raid party, where the overly enthusiastic leader pumps his fist and rallies everyone to charge full speed ahead into the darkness, only for the energetic guide to suddenly freeze in his tracks, causing the hunters behind him to crash together, leaving the annoyed party members to complain about the abrupt stop before they look up and freeze in absolute terror. Fukuyama points a trembling finger into the dark fog, spotting what looks like a human silhouette, but instead of a lost survivor, a glowing, bandaged monstrosity slowly emerges from the cavern's depths, radiating a sinister red aura that instantly shatters any hope of this being a normal raid. Suddenly, a massive razor-sharp bandage slices down through the air, crashing violently into the water below, leaving the terrified raid leader to freeze in absolute horror as he finally recognizes the threat, screaming that this is a legendary bloody mummy, a high-ranked terror that has absolutely no business being here. As the creature unleashes a deafening screech, Fukuyama frantically orders his panicked squad to take up battle positions, while a seasoned vanguard steps forward, warning everyone that the beast will endlessly regenerate without precise strikes. Risa readies her weapon alongside the frontliners, shouting a warning about the monster's incredibly fast whip attacks, as the ranged attackers aim their weapons, knowing that even a single poisonous scratch will mean instant death. Reigo is completely blown away by the frontliner's speed, realizing this elite guild is on a whole different level, while the terrifying mummy prepares its next move, instinctively hunting down whoever possesses the strongest aura in the room, prompting the green-haired mage to assume the beast will naturally target their energetic leader, Fukuyama, as the bandaged monstrosity unleashes another chaotic wave of razor-sharp attacks across the cavern, leaving the vanguard to coordinate their strategy, shouting for the damage dealers to focus entirely on offense. Fukuyama braces himself to tank the incoming blow, fully expecting to be the monster's primary target, but the massive bandage suddenly whips right past him, completely ignoring the frontliners altogether, shocking the raid leader as he watches the deadly attack bypass their entire defense. Screaming in sheer panic panic as the lethal strike flies straight toward the back of the group, forcing our disguised protagonist to freeze in terror as he realizes his hidden power makes him the ultimate target. As the deadly red strike barrels straight toward him, Reigo curses his terrible luck for being targeted first, realizing he has absolutely no choice but to tap into his hidden power by activating mediumship, prompting him to call out to Jean, who reluctantly manifests while complaining about his demanding attitude. But she still unleashes her powerful Witch's Shackles spell to intercept the incoming lethal blow, summoning a massive spectral blade that crashes down to absorb the brunt of the monster's attack, while our clever hero quickly pulls out a cheap dagger to make it look like a desperate block, letting the residual shockwave blast him backward into the water to keep its true strength hidden, leaving the nearby hunters completely horrified as they watch the helpless porter take a direct hit, only for Reigo to casually sit up and rub his head like he just stubbed his toe. He grins sheepishly under his hood, leaving the entire raid party absolutely baffled by his insane luck. Fukuyama quickly orders his support teammate to find the monster's weak point before things get any worse, prompting the mage to immediately activate her vital scan skill to locate the creature's core, which instantly projects a glowing pink target line directly onto the mummy's bandaged chest. But the shifting energy signature proves this high-rank beast is not going down easily, leaving the raid leader completely baffled as he realizes the weak point is constantly moving around. Realizing they are out of options, Fukuyama reluctantly decides to unleash his ultimate trump card, channeling a massive surge of fiery energy into a glowing crystal embedded in his hand, as it crackles with intense lightning while he prepares to launch a devastating magic attack. Screaming his homing skill's name as his eyes burn with pure, unbridled determination, before unleashing a blinding bolt of energy that strikes the monster with pinpoint accuracy. This terrifying mummy screeches in agony as the blinding bolt of energy barrels straight toward it, but the devastating attack pierces clean through its chest without hitting the shifting core, prompting our disguised protagonist to gasp in shock, thinking the raid leader completely missed his target, only for the fiery projectile to suddenly curve around in midair and lock back onto the beast, as Fukuyama smugly gestures with his fingers to guide the homing attack directly toward the moving weak point. This lightning bolt strikes with pinpoint accuracy, detonating in a massive explosion of crackling energy, engulfing the high-rank monster in a blazing inferno while the confident leader watches his handiwork, which immediately prompts the rest of the raid party to erupt in wild, relieved cheers, praising his legendary homing ability as the ultimate weapon that no monster can ever hope to escape, though the green-haired mage quietly wonders if wasting his ultimate skill this early was actually a good idea. Fukuyama sighs in exhaustion, explaining he had to waste his trump card to save the helpless porter, while our disguised hero stands in the background, trying to look as weak and pathetic as possible, prompting Joan to whisper that the monster only targeted him because of his massive hidden aura, teasingly suggesting that if he gets exposed, everyone will start calling him Stinky Reigo instead. Our boy immediately snaps back in frustration, insisting that his legendary title is actually Calampamity Reigo, but his comedic outrage is instantly cut short as a chilling sensation washes over him. Suddenly, 3 more terrifying mummies rise from the glowing water, completely blocking their path forward, leaving the exhausted raid party to look up in absolute horror as the ceiling begins to crawl. While Joan smugly points out that his ridiculous nickname is actually perfect for attracting endless disasters. As a massive horde of screaming monsters surrounds the terrified hunters, trapping them in a living nightmare, Joan continues to tease our nervous hero, pointing out that his disaster-attracting title is definitely living up to its name, while the terrified raid leader realizes they are completely surrounded by a massive horde of screaming undead. Fukuyama quickly calculates their terrible odds, knowing he barely survived fighting just one of these high-rank beasts, as 16 terrifying mummies close in on their small group of 14 panicked hunters, leaving only 4 elite fighters capable of actually holding their own against these high-rank threats. Realizing they need a miracle, the leader desperately orders his support mage to expose the monster's hidden cores, prompting the young girl to channel almost all of her remaining magical aura into one final spell. She unleashes her weak point imaging skill, projecting glowing pink target reticles directly onto the screeching beasts, revealing the shifting cores of the entire horde as they prepare to tear the party apart. Fukuyama screams for everyone to attack immediately, warning them that this crucial opening will not last long. This brave vanguard charges headfirst into the shallow water, determined to take down the screeching undead, and one agile hunter immediately lands a clean slash on a mummy's bandaged head, while an archer quickly follows up by firing a precise shot directly into another creature's chest. But these high-rank monsters barely even flinch, retaliating with a chaotic storm of razor-sharp bandages. A brilliant yellow sword strike deflects the incoming projectiles, barely keeping the frontliners from getting shredded, prompting a green-haired vanguard to step in front of our disguised hero to hold the line, angrily shouting for the useless porter to stop freezing up and start tossing out support items, only for a sudden brutal strike to slice clean through a nearby hunter's arm in an instant, leaving the terrified healer to rush forward with her magic, only to freeze in absolute panic as another lethal bandage whip barrels straight toward her, threatening to end her life on the spot. This terrified healer screams in panic as the chaotic battle quickly turns into a complete bloodbath, while Reigo watches in horror as another vanguard gets brutally impaled right before his eyes. leaving the rest of the squad screaming in agony as they fall into the glowing water. Realizing he cannot just stand by and watch them die, our boy dashes straight into the fray, prompting Jean to manifest and warn him that saving these people will completely blow his cover. But Reigo insists he has to act, blaming his own disaster-attracting title for summoning this nightmare. Jean quietly stares at him, wondering if he even realizes the true, terrifying scale of his power, as our disguised hero desperately shields a wounded hunter from a massive looming mummy, which immediately unleashes another lethal wave of razor-sharp bandages to slice them both to pieces, forcing a nearby mage to desperately summon her magic shield to block the incoming strike. A panicked hunter screams for the porter to watch out as a lethal strike comes flying in, but the razor-sharp bandage only manages to slice clean through Reigo's heavy backpack, leaving our disguised hero standing completely unharmed as the monster behind him bursts into flames, which absolutely flabbergasts Risa as she tries to process how a lowly porter survived, realizing the mysterious boy completely vanished from sight in the blink of an eye. Joan smugly manifests to praise his growing mastery over her legendary combat skills. Meanwhile, the rest of the struggling raid party continues desperately fighting the remaining undead, trying their absolute best to hold the line against the overwhelming horde, while the exhausted support mage channels her remaining magic to shield another wounded ally. Knowing he must keep a low profile, Reigo quickly pulls his hood back down. Reigo suddenly unleashes a massive surge of fiery energy, declaring that everyone here is his comrade, which immediately catches Joan's attention as she watches his sudden power spike with genuine curiosity, realizing that our boy has somehow grown even stronger since his last major battle against Agu, as the intense magical energy crackles wildly around his cheap little dagger. She wonders if his desperate desire to protect his allies is boosting his power to new heights, especially since his aura is multiplying exponentially and burning twice as bright as before, prompting the legendary spirit to smile in amusement at her host's ridiculous potential. Reigo blames himself for this disaster, swearing to save everyone from his calamity no matter what, calling out to Joan to join the fray as she reluctantly agrees to back him up, unleashing her powerful witch restraint spell as our hero charges headfirst into the chaotic battle. Reigo charges forward with his flaming dagger, while Joan's spirit hovers above him to unleash her magic, and in a flash of crackling lightning, he strikes the first mummy before anyone can even react, slicing clean through its bandaged body with a massive wave of concentrated, blazing energy, leaving our disguised hero standing completely unfazed as the intense heat radiates from his cheap weapon, while the nearby hunters freeze in absolute shock, unable to comprehend this sudden display of godlike power. Joan smiles in pure amazement, realizing his massive aura is actually far stronger than she originally estimated, as a glowing dark crystal manifests in the air, pulsing with a strange and volatile energy, prompting another hunter to seize the distraction and lock onto a nearby mummy's exposed core, charging straight ahead with a desperate battle cry to strike the beast down for good, landing a devastating blow that engulfs the shrieking monster in a massive explosion of bright flames. This orange-haired hunter stands frozen in front of the blazing inferno, completely stunned by the sudden explosion, stuttering in absolute disbelief as he tries to process the porter's ridiculous display of raw power, while his female teammate gasps in shock, unable to comprehend how a lowly porter pulled that off. Even their confident leader screams in pure confusion, his mind completely broken by the impossible turn of events. As the dust settles over the glowing water, the stunned hunters stare at Reigo in dead silence, only for another terrifying mummy to suddenly creep up right behind the distracted green-haired vanguard, prompting him to spin around in sheer panic as he realizes the undead horde is still active. Seeing the imminent danger, the pink-haired mage desperately raises her staff to warn her vulnerable leader. Meanwhile, another brave hunter lunges forward with his weapon, determined to keep the monsters at bay. Fortunately, a support mage quickly activates a massive pink magic circle, blasting the beast with a powerful energy beam. This terrifying mummy screeches in agony as intense, bright orange flames completely consume its bandaged body, leaving the exhausted hunters to watch in absolute bewilderment as their deadly pursuer crumbles to ash, prompting the entire raid party to let out a collective sigh of pure, exhausted relief, though they immediately begin whispering among themselves, trying to figure out whose overpowered skill saved their lives, prompting a confused vanguard to ask Fukuyama if he unleashed another trump card, which the leader quickly denies, while the green-haired mage frantically shakes her head, admitting she was fully prepared to meet her maker, leaving the orange-haired hunter to chalk the whole miraculous rescue up to pure, unadulterated luck. Meanwhile, the pink-haired healer continues patching up her wounded teammates as they slowly pick themselves back up, just incredibly grateful that everyone managed to survive this absolute nightmare of a dungeon run. As the battered group limps forward, completely oblivious to the fact that their lowly porter is the real savior, Reigo pulls his hood back and adjusts his jacket, letting out a quiet sigh of relief as he blames his own disaster-attracting title for almost dragging the entire raid party down again. But Joan quickly steps in to correct him, insisting that nobody is born to cause disasters, revealing that the terrifying mummies were actually drawn to this location by his massive aura. Our boy stands completely stunned by this revelation, realizing his hidden power is a literal beacon. Meanwhile, Riisa watches him closely from across the cavern as he quietly sheaths his cheap weapon, convinced that the seemingly weak porter definitely did something to save them from the horde. Unable to comprehend how a lowly support worker could possibly move so fast he completely disappeared, she narrows her eyes in deep suspicion, determined to uncover the true identity of this mysterious kid, while Rigo quickly gets back to work, trying his best to act like a completely useless porter. A panicked hunter turns to Fukuyama, pointing out that this dungeon is way too dangerous for a Class B run, suggesting they immediately fall back to regroup, but the exhausted leader can only stare ahead in grim silence, explaining that this is actually a quest-type dungeon, meaning they are completely locked in until the boss is defeated. While the others lament their lack of escape items, one hunter desperately suggests sending out a distress signal, prompting the orange-haired girl to pull out her communication device, confident she can call for immediate backup, only for the screen to glitch out with static, completely failing to connect to the outside world. She stares at the dead device in absolute horror, realizing their only lifeline has just been cut off, before quickly trying to mask her sheer panic with a forced smile to keep everyone from losing their minds. But the terrifying reality of being trapped in this nightmare quickly sinks in, leaving the hunters utterly paralyzed with fear, while Risa watches the unfolding chaos with a sharp gaze, knowing their survival now hinges on a miracle. Risa desperately tries to rally the exhausted hunters, urging everyone to stay calm and keep their heads up, pointing out that they all survived the brutal encounter and still have a fighting chance, only for a confused hunter to point out that their original raid party only had 14 members. Reigo freezes in panic, wondering if the sharp-eyed girl can actually see Joan's floating spirit next to him, but she simply starts counting the group members one by one to prove her math is correct, only to count all the way to 15, completely oblivious to the creepy green face looming behind them. A massive glowing green spider with a bizarre human face hangs upside down right in their midst, prompting the white-haired girl to let out a blood-curdling scream as she finally processes the terrifying intruder, while the creepy creature wriggles its legs, ready to turn one of them into a host, leaving her to frantically warn the group to dodge before the parasitic beast can lay its eggs. This creepy spider monster mutters a chilling warning about its lord's arrival before scuttling away, forcing our disguised hero to stare in silent concern as he processes the creature's words, while the rest of the raid party watches the bizarre beast retreat deeper into the cavern, prompting Fukuyama to immediately order a pursuit, much to the shock of his exhausted vanguard, who frantically questions if chasing a creepy parasitic monster is actually their best option right now, only for the leader to suddenly freeze as a terrifying, low rumbling echoes through the darkness, as dozens of glowing red eyes emerge from the shadows behind them with a menacing hiss, leaving the green-haired vanguard to realize a massive horde of mummies is closing in fast. Knowing they are completely cornered, Fukuyama yells for everyone to run and follow the spider instead, with Reigo quietly following behind, watching his desperate teammates charge headfirst into the unknown. Reigo suddenly remembers the name Masakato from Agyu's note, realizing it connects directly to the holy relic, while Jean doubts such a legendary masterpiece could actually be hidden in a bleak dump like this. But our boy is just thrilled he navigated this creepy cavern without getting completely lost. Meanwhile, that bizarre human-faced spider continues scuttling along the ceiling right above their heads, keeping the exhausted vanguard on high alert as they cautiously advance deeper into the dark, completely unaware that the creepy creature is actively guiding them toward its mysterious master. Riisa grips her staff tightly, her mind racing with doubt as she watches the group follow the beast, wondering if blindly trusting a parasitic monster is just a one-way ticket to an early grave, especially since this high-level dungeon is way more terrifying than anyone originally warned her about. Though she finds some comfort knowing that their seemingly weak porter is actually a ridiculously overpowered powerhouse. Risa eyes Reigo's back, realizing she can use this ridiculously strong porter as a personal shield, while also finding the perfect opportunity to test his true power by cooking up a little scheme, prompting her to quietly activate her deceptive magic skill called Paranoia with a glowing pink circle, which immediately lets out a dramatic scream that echoes through the cavern, catching our boy completely off guard, as he spins around to find her sitting on the ground and clutching her leg in apparent agony. She tearfully claims she got hurt during the previous fight, putting on a masterclass in fake acting, since her skill merely fabricates realistic-looking injuries to deceive others and gain sympathy without causing actual harm, leaving her to smirk secretly as the gullible porter panics over the massive pool of fake blood, though she quickly worries she might have overdone it when he frantically digs through his bag for supplies. But our kind-hearted hero immediately kneels down to carefully wrap her leg, completely falling for her little trap. Believing her fake injury is real, our gullible hero immediately offers to carry her on his back, while Risa happily climbs aboard, secretly smirking at how easily she managed to manipulate him. She marvels at his ridiculous kindness, realizing her deceptive paranoia skill worked even better than she expected, planning to use this overpowered kid as a meat shield while they wait for backup to arrive. But her selfish daydream daydreaming is cut short when a chilling screech echoes through the dark cavern. A massive wave of terrifying mummies suddenly emerges from the shadows directly behind the lagging pair, leaving them completely cut off from the rest of the raid party as the monsters close in. Risa instantly panics, screaming at Reigo to run faster while trying to maintain her fake injured act, which only confuses our boy until she points out the terrifying horde snapping at their heels, prompting him to prepare his witch restraint spell to protect his teammates from getting dragged into the fight. A massive ancient stone archway looms ahead, leading the group deeper into the heart of the dungeon, leaving the exhausted hunters to stare in absolute dread at the ominous path before them, as the entire raid party gathers in front of the grand entrance, feeling incredibly small under the high ceiling, only for a swarm of creepy blue spiders to crawl overhead, prompting a terrified scream from the group, while their bizarre human-faced guide mutters a chilling warning before leaving them to face the music. Suddenly, a massive explosion of fire erupts as a terrifying dragon lets out a deafening roar, freezing the entire party in absolute paralyzed horror as they stare at the colossal beast, which turns out to be the legendary Tanjo dragon, chained up but still radiating pure destruction, forcing the panicked leader to realize they are facing a deadly A-rank monster they must somehow defeat to escape, with the chained beast glaring down at them with a terrifying toothy grin that promises absolute chaos. This massive red dragon glares down at them, its powerful neck bound by heavy golden chains, leaving the stunned raid party to realize that this terrifying A-rank boss is actually a prisoner, prompting Fukuyama to frantically question who could possibly have the power to keep such a beast captive, as the colossal dragon lets out a deafening roar, desperately straining against its unbreakable metal restraints, leaving the terrified hunters to stare in absolute silence at a bizarre scenario they have never witnessed before, only for a creepy blue-skinned spider with a human face to suddenly babble a chilling warning, as dozens of identical parasitic creatures swarm the ceiling, chanting for the intruders to kneel before their master, forcing the exhausted vanguard to shrink back in sheer terror as the creepy horde closes in. Suddenly, a massive pillar of intense purple fire erupts from the ground, radiating an overwhelming, suffocating aura, leaving Fukuyama and his teammates completely paralyzed with fear as a terrifying silhouette emerges from the flames. A glowing purple fire entity floats menacingly above the group, surrounded by a swarm of creepy spiders, prompting Fukuyama to angrily demand answers, desperately asking why they were dragged into this trap. But the fiery entity merely crackles with intense energy, completely ignoring the leader's desperate cries. Suddenly, a dark weapon descends from the ceiling, plunging straight into the stone floor right before them, revealing a legendary katana wrapped in a sinister, glowing purple aura that radiates pure malice, as the creepy entity flashes a wicked grin, demanding that the blade be allowed to drink blood. This fiery monster then locks its gaze directly onto the terrified, orange-haired leader, leaving Fukuyama to freeze in absolute dread as he realizes he has been singled out, only for the creature to command him to slaughter his own comrades with the cursed weapon, forcing the horrified leader to gasp in pure shock at this incredibly twisted ultimatum. This hunters gasp in absolute shock at the monster's twisted offer, unable to believe their ears, especially since the creepy entity promises to spare the leader's life alone if he betrays his comrades, leaving Fukuyama to grit his teeth in pure rage as he processes the horrific ultimatum, before he furiously rejects the deal, shouting that he would never sell out his own team, immediately launching his homing skill to strike the fiery beast with a barrage of glowing projectiles, while channeling every last drop of his aura to unleash his absolute maximum power. This explosive attack collides directly with the purple entity, erupting in a massive flash of light, prompting his relieved teammates to cheer, fully convinced their brave leader just saved the day, as Fukuyama stands tall in front of the smoke, basking in his apparent victory, only for the purple flames to suddenly flare up even stronger, completely unfazed by his ultimate move. This purple entity's magic circles flare up with terrifying power, preparing to unleash a devastating counterattack, before a blinding flash of light suddenly slices clean through the air right behind the unsuspecting leader, leaving Fukuyama frozen in his combat stance as he tries to process what just happened, only to realize too late that the invisible strike has already bypassed his defenses, while his teammates watch in absolute horror as their strongest fighter is effortlessly dismantled, sending the orange-haired leader flying backward as a massive slash erupts across his chest. He crashes onto the cold stone floor, staring blankly at the ceiling in complete disbelief, coughing up blood as his life force rapidly drains from the devastating wound, prompting a panicked teammate to scream for medical help before their leader completely fades away, as the group's healer rushes forward to desperately cast her green recovery magic over his shattered body. While the healer desperately tries to stabilize their fallen leader, the purple flames continue to crackle menacingly, as the fiery entity fully manifests its terrifying form, radiating an overwhelming pressure throughout the cavern, only to sigh in utter disappointment at how easily their strongest fighter was taken down, prompting the creature to shift its glowing gaze toward the terrified brown-haired girl trembling on the floor, demanding that she take up the cursed blade and slaughter her own allies to save herself. Risa hyperventilates in absolute panic, her mind racing as she stares at the sinister, glowing weapon, but she reluctantly picks up the sword when the monster orders her to finish the helpless leader, who is currently too weak to fight back against this sudden, horrific betrayal. leaving her to slowly march toward her teammates with the cursed katana crackling in her hands, while the frantic healer looks up in pure horror, realizing their supposed ally is about to strike. Reisa tearfully apologizes to her helpless leader while holding the cursed purple blade over him, sobbing about how he always looked out for her during their dangerous dungeon raids, leaving Fukuyama to stare up in absolute disbelief as she admits her desperate desire to survive, crying that her parents back home simply cannot make it on their own without her. But just as she prepares to swing the weapon, a sudden dark slash cuts through the air, severing her arm in an instant and leaving her screaming in pure, agonizing shock, as the impatient purple flame entity mocks her speed, demanding that she hurry up already. Meanwhile, our disguised hero watches the horrific betrayal and sudden punishment unfold from the shadows, his face twisting in deep concern as he processes the sheer cruelty of this dungeon boss. Realizing that his current level of restraint is simply not going to cut it anymore, this healer desperately tries to patch up their leader, while Risa realizes they stand absolutely zero chance against this monster, clutching her bleeding shoulder in sheer agony as the reality of this overwhelming power finally sinks in. Meanwhile, the terrified healer pours all her magic into Fukuyama, deeply regretting her choice to ever become a hunter, as the sheer hopelessness of their situation leaves her completely paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, the fiery boss demands she stop hesitating, threatening to eliminate her too if she doesn't hurry up and strike, forcing the trembling girl to hyperventilate as she struggles to process the horrific choice before her. With no other way to survive, she reluctantly picks up the cursed purple blade with her remaining hand, prompting her horrified teammate to look up in absolute disbelief as she realizes what is about to happen, only for Reisa to raise the glowing sword high above her head, tearfully sobbing apologies to her helpless comrades, before letting out a desperate, guilt-ridden scream as she prepares to swing the fatal blow. Reisa squeezes her eyes shut, preparing to swing the cursed blade in a desperate bid for survival, but our hooded hero suddenly steps in, casually catching the glowing purple sword with his bare hand, letting out a relieved sigh as he flashes a reassuring smile to his terrified teammate, leaving the trembling girl completely speechless as she stares at her unexpected savior in absolute disbelief. Before he gently takes the cursed weapon from her grasp, promising to handle the situation himself, she collapses to the cold floor in sheer relief, watching him stand tall against the looming threat, while his badass, eye-patch-wearing ally suddenly arrives to comment on the massive crowd of creepy blue spiders overhead, prompting our overpowered porter to casually reveal that he already knows she is talking about something else. As a massive horde of screaming, purple skeleton ghosts suddenly rises from the shadows directly behind them. These tormented spirits wail in agony, desperately begging for mercy as they swarm the terrifying cavern. These terrified spirits beg not to be left behind, desperately screaming to escape their eternal torment, while the eye-patch-wearing ally points out that channeling this massive army of ghosts will grant him monstrous power, prompting our hero to agree, fully prepared to carry the heavy burden of their lingering resentment. Meanwhile, the fallen leader lies helpless on the floor as green healing magic desperately stabilizes his condition, leaving his traumatized teammates to weep in absolute despair over their seemingly hopeless situation, while their terrified companion stares in utter shock at the overwhelming danger closing in on them. Suddenly, the trembling hunter flinches as a calm presence approaches him from behind, revealing our disguised porter casually pulling back his hood to ask if he can finally step into the fight, leaving the stunned hunter to stammer in absolute disbelief as he recognizes the legendary face before him, screaming the name of Calamity Rego as our overpowered hero unleashes a brilliant blue flame from his eye. This panicked hunter frantically screams at Rego, insisting that a mere F-rank porter stands absolutely zero chance, pointing out that even their elite B-rank party was completely powerless against this terrifying boss. But our overpowered hero remains completely unfazed, his eye glowing with a brilliant blue flame, as he calmly stares down the massive purple entity radiating pure malice across the cavern, before flashing a confident smirk and casually promising his teammates that this fight will be over soon. Meanwhile, a quick flashback reveals the chaotic events that took place just a little while ago, introducing a cheerful purple-haired girl who seems entirely too relaxed for a dangerous dungeon raid, while a horde of terrifying, bandaged mummies suddenly bursts into flames all around her, leaving her to sit peacefully amidst the roaring firestorm as if nothing is happening, while a fiery ally impatiently commands a nervous young hunter to hurry up and make his move. This purple-haired girl is thrilled they finally made it, completely ignoring the absolute chaos around them, while the defeated leader lies bleeding on the cold floor, barely clinging to his life, forcing Reisa to sob in absolute despair as she clutches her bleeding shoulder. Meanwhile, our disguised hero is actually carrying his purple-haired companion piggyback style through the danger, though she immediately pouts when he drops her off to face the boss alone, leaving the remaining hunters completely baffled by how fast he moved toward the fiery monster, as Rego steps forward with an icy glare, ready to end this nightmare once and for all, prompting the terrified hunter to stare in absolute shock as the truth finally clicks, with our overpowered protagonist unleashing a brilliant blue flame from his eye, drawing his blade, and his companion gasps in pure excitement, realizing she is standing next to the legendary Calamity Rego. Rego stands tall as his companion notes how lucky they are that he finally arrived, while our overpowered hero flashes a confident smirk, promising that this nightmare will end shortly, leaving his purple-haired ally absolutely thrilled to watch the legendary hunter do what he does best. Without wasting another second, Reigo firmly grips the hilt of the cursed purple katana, effortlessly pulling the sinister blade from the stone floor right in front of the floating boss, prompting the fiery monster to flare up in pure disgust over its interrupted feast. But our hero immediately fires back, calling out the hypocritical beast for slaughtering innocent hunters. As the surrounding horde of blue skeleton ghosts cackles wildly at the sudden confrontation, this boss dismisses his anger as ridiculous, activating its glowing magic circles to strike him down, forcing Reigo to leap into action as a massive wave of energy erupts across the cavern. A massive stone pillar is sliced cleanly in half by a sudden, invisible strike, crashing heavily onto the cavern floor as sparks fly from the sheer force of the impact, leaving the purple flame boss momentarily stunned that its lethal attack completely missed its target, while Reigo quickly repositions himself in a defensive stance, tightly gripping his weapon, prompting the fiery monster to mockingly praise him for actually managing to dodge the blow, though our hero secretly worries that a single direct hit from this beast will instantly end him, as the boss immediately summons two glowing magic circles to unleash its next devastating spell. Suddenly, a massive surge of energy erupts, forcing Reigo to react on pure instinct, unleashing a powerful glowing counterslash that cuts straight through the incoming magical threat, leaving our young hero to gasp in pure relief as he realizes his desperate gamble actually worked. Risa desperately warns Reigo that slicing the monster is useless because it simply cannot be killed, but our hero barely has time to process her words before the purple energy begins to swirl menacingly, catching him completely off guard as a sudden blinding blast of magical energy erupts right in front of him, forcing Reigo to rely on pure instinct to dodge the lethal strike in the nick of time, as the devastating beam tears across the stone floor and leaves a trail of crackling sparks behind, leaving the fiery boss genuinely intrigued by how a mere porter managed to evade its ultimate attack. Reigo catches his breath on the ground while his ghostly, eye-patch-wearing ally praises his incredible growth, teasingly asking when he became so stubborn that he only listens to the advice of the living, prompting our overpowered protagonist to lock eyes with the massive threat with absolute, unwavering resolve, as brilliant blue flames ignite around him, setting the stage for a truly legendary showdown. Reigo suddenly realizes the true nature of the terrifying enemies standing right in front of him, as the screaming skeleton ghosts beg for mercy while being forced to attack their own allies, leaving the tormented spirits to weep in absolute agony as they strike down helpless victims. Our hero closes his eyes, quickly deducing that direct physical attacks are completely useless against these formless entities, prompting him to narrow his gaze as he desperately searches for a weakness to exploit. Suddenly, the boss activates its glowing magic circles, unleashing a devastating barrage of purple energy beams, forcing Reigo to wince in pain as the sheer pressure of the attack pushes him back, while his aura rapidly drains from constantly maintaining his defensive spells against the onslaught. This relentless purple lasers continue to rain down, obliterating the stone floor in a chaotic display of power, requiring our young protagonist to dodge frantically while trying to devise a brand new strategy to survive. Reigo quickly realizes that this formless boss has no physical body to strike directly, but his cheerful purple-haired ally is already one step ahead and ready to act, prompting a nearby hunter to unleash a massive firestorm skill to create a sudden distraction, though the arrogant boss easily shrugs off the flames and mocks their desperate stalling tactics, preparing to end the fight instantly by activating its lethal glowing magic circles. Suddenly, a mysterious force cuts through the air and catches the monster completely off guard, leaving the startled entity to panic as it realizes it has been completely trapped, as the cursed katana stands firmly in the center of the roaring battlefield, acting as a powerful anchor that drags the formless monster straight toward its blade, allowing our clever hero to confidently declare that the beast has finally taken the bait. This purple-haired girl unleashes a glowing pink spell, revealing that those horrific wounds were actually just a clever illusion, while Reigo confidently points out that the monster's clumsy movements completely gave away its secret, exposing the fact that the cursed purple katana itself is the boss's true physical form. Suddenly, a nearby hunter unleashes a massive firestorm skill to engulf the entire cavern in blazing flames, but the arrogant purple boss easily shrugs off the heat, mocking their desperate distraction as laughable, as it prepares to obliterate them, completely unaware that Reigo is already setting up his next move. Our hero quickly turns to Risa, who is completely stunned by his sudden and reckless plan, frantically asking if she can cast her injury-faking illusion skill on other people besides herself, prompting the cheerful girl to flash a bright smile as she processes his bizarre request, before she eagerly confirms she can do it, giving our clever protagonist the perfect opening to strike. Risa is absolutely thrilled that Reigo saw through her fake injury, eagerly agreeing to help him with a favor, while the furious boss activates its glowing magic circles to wipe them out once and for all. But a sudden, unexpected strike cuts straight through its spectral form and leaves it completely stunned, forcing the panicked monster to realize that it actually took real damage from their desperate counterattack. As the surrounding cavern erupts into a blazing inferno, the cursed katana stands firmly in the ground, acting as a powerful magnet that drags the formless beast straight toward its sharp edge, allowing our smug protagonist to confidently declare that the arrogant monster walked right into their trap. This cheerful girl proudly activates her illusion magic, explaining how her unique skill makes their injuries look completely real. Our clever hero stands ready with his blade, revealing that watching the beast's clumsy movements exposed its secret, exposing the ultimate truth that the cursed purple katana itself is the monster's true physical body. Reisa is absolutely thrilled that Rigo acknowledged her skill, desperately trying to keep her cool, though she quickly tries to snap herself out of it to focus on the battle. Meanwhile, Rigo points his weapon at the boss, confidently declaring that the sword is its true form, prompting the arrogant monster to admit he is clever but insist it won't change a thing. But our overpowered hero simply flashes a confident smirk, promising to make it work anyway. With a sudden burst of blue energy, Reigo charges straight toward the massive purple entity, swinging his blade with incredible speed as the two forces collide in a flash of light, leaving the boss to mock his seemingly desperate moves and flimsy weapon, boasting that his tiny aura stands absolutely zero chance against a blade steeped in blood, only for Reigo to unleash a devastating counterstrike that shatters the monster's absolute confidence. This boss channels a devastating skill, wrapping the cursed sword in a massive burst of purple flames, unleashing a terrifying shadow attack that forces our young hero to brace for impact. But the sheer force of the onslaught pushes Reigo back as his aura rapidly drains, leaving the arrogant monster to mock his fading strength as he struggles to hold his ground. Without giving him a moment to breathe, the fiery beast activates its glowing magic circle, launching another relentless barrage of energy beams that catches our protagonist completely off guard, sending him crashing backward onto the cold stone floor as the devastating shockwaves ripple through the cavern. Suddenly, glowing golden chains materialize out of thin air, tightly binding a massive red dragon, prompting the colossal beast to let out a deafening roar that shakes the entire dungeon floor, leaving Reigo completely speechless as he stares in absolute shock at this chaotic new threat. This massive red dragon lets out a terrifying roar, sending the remaining hunters into a complete panic as they desperately try to shield their injured allies from the impending destruction, prompting a brave hunter to unleash his ultimate fire spell to stop the beast. But the arrogant purple boss easily shrugs it off, mockingly telling them to watch their friends die, forcing our hero to sprint forward with everything he has, fearing he won't make it in time, only to freeze in utter shock as a sudden shift on the battlefield catches him off guard, when a blue-armored spirit suddenly steps in to block the massive dragon's path with a desperate warning, as a horde of ghostly skeleton warriors rises to protect the helpless hunters from further harm, leaving Reigo to watch in absolute awe as the spirits finally take a stand against their tormentor, ready to risk everything to shield the living and put an end to this nightmare, once and for all. Reigo activates his mediumship skill, igniting his dagger with a brilliant blue flame of spiritual energy, raising the glowing weapon high to call upon the souls of all the fallen hunters, begging the tormented spirits to lend him their strength so they can finally fight back together. This sudden plea catches the skeletal ghosts completely off guard, sparking a flicker of hope in their eyes, while his eye-patch-wearing ally and the other spirits realize they finally have a chance at redemption. Eagerly offering their power, the spirits channel their lingering regrets directly into his blazing blade, transforming the small dagger into a massive, towering beacon of pure blue light, prompting our hero to swing the colossal energy sword with absolute precision and force, unleashing a devastating crescent wave that tears through the air toward the massive red dragon, slicing straight through the colossal beast's maw to deliver a truly spectacular, decisive blow. This nearby hunters watch in absolute horror as blood splatters across the battlefield, leaving them completely speechless as the massive red dragon's head falls to the ground, which only serves to infuriate the purple flame boss as its rage boils over, prompting Reigo to tighten his grip on his blue-flamed dagger for the final showdown, as he boldly promises to make the monster pay for every single life it took. Unfazed by the threat, the arrogant boss unleashes a swarm of deadly shadow ravens to shred him, forcing our young protagonist to react instantly as the dark projectiles rain down from above, though he easily deflects the incoming assault while keeping his eyes locked on the cursed sword, declaring that this nightmare is finally over as he charges straight into the fiery entity, unleashing a brilliant decisive strike that cuts through the darkness to claim his ultimate victory. Reigo pours all his spiritual power into his blade, clashing directly with the boss's cursed weapon, while the ghostly spirits of the fallen hunters join the fray, adding their blue flames to his strike. This collective energy surges forward, overwhelming the dark entity with a massive wave of righteous power, forcing the arrogant monster to let out a pained groan as its dark defenses begin to crumble, and a sharp cracking sound echoes through the cavern as the cursed purple katana starts to shatter, unleashing a blinding explosion of golden light that completely vaporizes the remnants of the boss's physical form, leaving the nearby hunters to watch in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend the incredible power of their savior. Even the veteran raid members stand completely frozen, trying to process the miraculous victory they just witnessed, as the defeated boss screams in pure agony, cursing the mere porter who managed to end its reign, before the dark energy finally dissipates, leaving our tired hero standing victorious as the grateful crowd cheers. This surrounding hunters erupt into wild cheers, celebrating a victory they never thought possible, while others stand completely frozen in absolute disbelief at the sheer scale of his power, staring down at the severed head of the massive beast that once terrified them, unable to comprehend how an A-rank boss was just obliterated in a single strike. Whispers quickly spread through the crowd as they wonder if this kid is the legendary Calamity Rigo, but our humble protagonist just offers a quiet, gentle smile amidst all the sudden fame, watching peacefully as the liberated spirits of the fallen hunters finally ascend to the afterlife, leaving Riisa to stare at him with sparkling eyes, completely captivated by his incredible strength. Though she cannot help but wonder why such an overpowered hunter is running low-rank raids, before Reigo calmly snaps her out of her thoughts by calling her name with a warm smile. Reigo warmly thanks Riisa, telling her that her illusion skill was the real key to their victory, which sends the flustered girl into a blushing frenzy over her supposedly useless magic finally doing something useful. Meanwhile, the injured orange-haired hunter recovers and admits that they were completely saved by his incredible intervention. But our humble protagonist quickly downplays his massive achievement, claiming he merely overstepped his boundaries as a porter, prompting the grateful raid leader to compare his overwhelming power to that of an elite S-rank hunter, leaving Reigo completely speechless as the man sincerely thanks him for saving everyone's life. With the massive dragon defeated, the return gate finally opens and the survivors prepare to head back home, though our mysterious hero decides to stay behind in the cavern for just a little bit longer, explaining that he has some unfinished business to investigate as a strange purple flame spirit suddenly appears, joined by his loyal eye-patch-wearing ally as they closely examine this bizarre remnant of the defeated boss. This terrifying boss has shrunk down into a tiny, harmless purple blob floating in the air, prompting Reigo to call it cute and handy, while his eye-patch-wearing ally completely misinterprets his words. But she quickly agrees with his assessment as she takes the little spirit into her hands, allowing our clever hero to piece together how the monster's power was anchored to its physical weapon, meaning the moment they shattered the cursed katana, its massive spiritual form instantly lost all its strength, which is exactly how Jin's own legendary sword acts as a conduit for her unique skills. In other words, this harmless little purple blob is actually just a lingering ghost, while the shattered katana itself served as its physical anchor to the mortal realm, or what the system refers to as a powerful holy relic that Reigo now holds, leaving him to wonder why ordinary hunters were able to see the spirit in the first place. Jin points out a major flaw in the logic, noting that ghosts are fundamentally different from monsters, meaning they shouldn't be able to touch or attack the living under normal circumstances, prompting Reigo to wonder if this creature possessed a unique skill unlike his own mediumship. His eye-patch-wearing ally listens quietly, her sharp gaze focused on the floating purple remnant, before suggesting he simply use his powers to bind the spirit and ask it directly. Realizing she has a point, Reigo decides to make the little ghost possess his own gear, hoping this clever trick will finally force the creature to reveal its bizarre secrets. He immediately activates his mediumship skill, channeling a brilliant blue aura into his trusty dagger, but the purple spirit suddenly reacts with unexpected violence, clashing wildly with his energy, unleashing a massive surge of spiritual pressure that catches our young hero completely off guard. Reigo gasps in pain as the overwhelming purple energy surges directly into his mind, forcing him to struggle against a dark, suffocating pressure that threatens to drag him under. But our stubborn hero grits his teeth, desperately trying to force the mocking spirit to submit, unleashing a blinding flash of white light that completely engulfs the entire cavern, revealing a mysterious, glowing silhouette of a person standing right in the center of the blast. This sudden transformation leaves Reigo shouting in utter confusion as the blinding radiance fades, unveiling a beautiful, unconscious blonde girl who looks completely out of place in this dungeon, leaving our young protagonist holding his dagger in absolute shock as she slumps against the wall, prompting him to wonder if this helpless girl was actually the true form of the terrifying boss, only for his eye-patch-wearing ally to instantly shut down his theory with a blunt denial. Reigo is completely shocked to learn the girl is human, wondering how she could possibly survive down here, but Jin calmly tells him to ask her directly as a glowing purple silhouette begins to materialize, prompting our young hero to whip around in absolute shock as the sudden spiritual pressure spikes, only to realize this terrifying new entity is actually a ghost of a fully armored samurai.